in those eyes. How do I put it? They've a strong sense of duty. Like whatever you start, you'll always see through, no matter what. If you'll permit me, there's something I'd very much like to show you. But first, I just need to hear it from you. Say that you'll stay till the very end. With that done, let's get you on your way.
Originally released in Japan in October 2012 and finally arriving in North America now about a year and a half later, Bravely Default comes just in time to help rejuvenate the subgenre of old-school Japanese RPGs, which many feel has been slowly dying in the West as of late. Whether you agree with this particular assessment or not, there's no denying Bravely Default's old-school pedigree. It was developed by the same Square-Enix team that brought us the similarly retro 2010 DS title Final Fantasy IV Heroes of Light, and serves as that game's spiritual successor. This fact becomes apparent right from the game's onset as players are introduced to a world called Luxendark, where balance is kept by 4 mythical shimmering crystals, each one representing one of the 4 elements that make up all of creation: fire, water, earth, and wind. Of course, players arrive in Luxendark just in time to watch as one of these crystals loses its light and the world literally starts falling apart. Yep, Bravely Default is an old-school Final Fantasy title in everything but name. Not that there's anything wrong with that. The gaming world, especially the modern gaming world, could use more old-school JRPGs, and Bravely Default fully, thoroughly, and unapologetically wears that mantle with pride. If you're not a fan of JRPGs, Bravely Default will be the last title to change your mind about that, but players in the mood for a long, meaty JRPG they can lose themselves in will be delighted with this game. Players are introduced to Bravely Default's 4 youthful main characters: Farmboy Tiz Arior, Wind Vestal Agnes Oblige, Amnesiac Rogue Ringabel, and plucky warrior princess Adia Lee very early on in the story, allowing the adventure to get underway quickly and earnestly. Don't let your cute, somewhat super deformed appearances fool you. Bravely Default's world is a bleak one, where the story is kicked off with the unceremonious deaths of everyone in Tiz's village, including his family and friends, and the body count only grows from there. I don't want to spoil anything that happens beyond the intro, but some political intrigue is thrown into the mix later on, and a happy ending very often feels just out of reach for our young heroes. The weight of the proceedings in Bravely Default is always palpable, and the villains are unrelentingly and deliciously evil. Thankfully, an excellent localization keeps players invested in the goings-on, and the genuinely entertaining, endearing, and often humorous interactions between Tiz and his friends help bring some much-needed levity to the proceedings. The banter between Lady Killer Ringabel and headstrong Adia is particularly enjoyable in this regard. Overall, Bravely Default's story is a strong one, and its lead characters are likable. The plot does unfortunately suffer from some pacing issues in the middle of an already long game, which could test the patience of less devoted players and makes it feel as though the game could benefit from being a bit shorter. Thanks to factors like random encounters, level grinding, and sparsely placed save points, Japanese RPGs often get a bad rap for being one of the most inconvenient, unfriendly kinds of games to actually play, a criticism that is not entirely undeserved at times. Thankfully, old school though it may be, Bravely Default goes to great lengths to mitigate or even completely eliminate these factors according to the player's choice. Extra tough boss got you down, but you don't feel like grinding? Kick the difficulty down a notch in the configuration menu and shift the odds in your favor. Caught deep in a dungeon with tough, high-level enemies with death just around the corner and no save point in sight? Set the random encounter rate to 0, safely hightail it out of there, and save. JRPG purists may call the inclusion of such options game-breaking or the easy way out, but as someone with precious little free gaming time to himself, I call them convenient and absolutely appreciate it. Bravely Default is thoroughly old school, and its default difficulty certainly reflects that, but these modern accoutrements mean that all JRPG fans can enjoy the game on their own merits, regardless of how much time they may or may not have to dedicate to it. Of course, players can also ratchet up the random encounter rate if they specifically want to grind, or increase the already considerable difficulty level for a super hardcore challenge if desired. Bravely Default is all about player choice. As stated before, underneath this layer of modern conveniences beats the heart of a deeply traditional JRPG, with the core gameplay and battle system based on the beloved job system first introduced in Final Fantasy V and later used in games like the Final Fantasy Tactics series and the 4 Heroes of Light. This system lets you assign each of your characters a specific job that confers upon them unique battle commands and support abilities related to that job. For example, the Black Mage job starts a character on the path to becoming a magical powerhouse and enables him to cast elemental attack spells like Fire and Blizzard, while the Knight job beefs up a character's HP and defense stats, enabling them to use abilities that focus on protecting their more frail allies, like the aforementioned Black Mage. These are just the most basic examples. There are more specialized exotic jobs too, such as the Performer, who sings songs that beef up the party's stats, and the Salve Maker, who can alter or enhance the effects of items in very specific ways. The longer characters spend in one job, the more job levels they will gain in that role through battle, allowing them to learn that job's more advanced, powerful abilities. The catch is that players can change their characters' jobs at any time, and characters are able to use both the commands of the job they currently currently hold, as well as another job set of battle commands, allowing for countless ways to customize your party to your liking. For example, you could train Tiz as a white mage for a while, gaining enough job levels to enable him to learn the white magic level 3 ability, then switch him to the thief job and set white magic as his secondary job command, effectively turning him into a speedy character who can ably heal his fellow party members in a pinch. The possibilities are virtually endless, and with a total of 23 jobs that slowly becomes available to you as you defeat certain bosses throughout the game, some of them optional, the amount of character customization in Bravely Default is vast. But the strategy doesn't stop there. Bravely Default gets its strange name from each character's ability to either default or brave in battle, and both commands add another thick layer of strategy to fights. Defaulting allows a character to bank that battle turn, called a brave point, for use later on while defending, minimizing any damage taken that turn. Braving enables a character to use the brave points they have banked at any time, allowing them to take several actions in one round of combat. You can bank up to 3 extra brave points for each of your characters and use some or all of them when you wish, and you can even take an advance on brave points you haven't saved up yet, but doing so will leave Tiz and friends sitting ducks until their brave points are out of the negative. Enemies have their own brave points and will default and brave to create their own advantages as well, and there are several powerful abilities that cost brave points to use, as well as other abilities that can affect both your and your enemy's brave point values. So in the end, the level of strategy in Bravely Default really cannot be understated. And make no mistake, this game expects you to learn it well and create your own advantages. Regular enemies hit hard and fast, even on the default difficulty setting, to say nothing of the bosses, who can and will wipe you out if you go in expecting to be able to just mash the attack command and win. And while the easy difficulty certainly makes things far more manageable, it's still not a mash A to win setting. There's so much going on and so many options available in Bravely Default from a gameplay perspective that I couldn't possibly cover it all in detail in this review. There's the Bravely Second mechanic, which lets you use points accumulated while your 3DS is asleep to stop time and use battle turn whenever you want. These points can also be bought with real money in a microtransaction style attempt at a cash grab that I'm not too fond of. Bravely Default also makes enormous use of the 3DS's popular Street Pass feature, allowing you to recruit real-life passersby into your game to help rebuild Tiz's destroyed village, eventually granting you access to shops with high-level equipment. Also, if you Street Pass someone you have registered in your 3DS friends list, you can summon them for a turn in battle and use whatever move they sent to you. This game really does have a staggering amount of depth, and that is one of its greatest strengths. Bravely Default also succeeds from an audiovisual standpoint. The music, composed by Japanese musician Revo, is an utter delight and calls to mind the fantastic 16-bit JRPG soundtracks of yesteryear, with booming, strong melodies composed in a style somewhere between traditional orchestra and progressive rock that just works, thoroughly immersing you in the world of Luxendark and appreciably enhancing the gameplay experience. The English voice acting is more of a mixed bag. It's mostly quite hammy and overblown, but not necessarily bad if you don't mind that sort of delivery. Most players, though, will likely opt for the generally superior Japanese voice track, which Square-Enix should be lauded for including in the game's Western release. Visually, Bravely Default may not be the most technically impressive game on the 3DS, but it succeeds on the strength of its art style, which sees the world of Luxendark brought to life in lavish detail. Towns almost look like hand-painted dioramas at times, and though the colors tend to be slightly pallid and washed out, this actually works in the game's favor by helping to sell Bravely Default's overall old-school high fantasy feel. Unfortunately, the game's use of stereoscopic 3D isn't particularly inspired, and it does feel like more could have been done in this regard, and you won't really be missing much if you choose to play with the 3D slider all the way down. Still, as a fan of the 3DS's stereoscopic 3D, I would have liked to see Square-Enix put in a little more effort here, especially considering all the time and attention that was so clearly put into the rest of the visual presentation. With a deeply strategic battle system, virtually endless party customization, gameplay options galore, enormous Street Pass integration, an engaging story, likable characters, and a mostly excellent audiovisual presentation, Bravely Default succeeds on all fronts as a quality JRPG. While its thoroughly old-school feel and presentation mean that it probably won't win over anyone who dislikes the genre, Square-Enix should be commended for adding some modern accoutrements to the gameplay that make the game accessible no matter how much time you have to devote to it. The story's pacing does falter somewhat in the middle part of the game, and it does feel like a bit more could have been done with the game's graphics despite the fantastic art style, but these are ultimately minor issues in the face of what is otherwise a compelling JRPG experience. We give it 4 out of 5 stars.